Once you have the CPI, it allows us to do some really interesting things. So, for example, it allows us to answer questions like adjusted for inflation, what is the highest grossing movie of all time? You know from your book what the answer to that question is, which is sort of surprising, right? It's a very old movie. Um, its gross wasn't really that much in that time's dollars, but when you use the CPI to bring it to today's dollars, it's by far the highest grossing movie of all time. Questions like who is the richest American of all time? We know that Bill Gates right now is the richest American alive right now with like something about like $80 billion. But adjusted for inflation, there have been some Americans who are even richer than Bill Gates today. Um, John D. Rockefeller had maybe just a couple $1 billion in wealth, but he had that at the turn of the 20th century when prices were much lower. And so adjusted for inflation, he is much richer than, say, Bill Gates. So how do we do these kind of calculations? And, other applications are like, interesting question is like, ask yourself how much money you make on your first job. Compare that to how much your father made or your mother made on their first job, or your grandfather, their grandmother made on their first jobs. The CPI can allow us to figure out, adjusted for inflation, who makes more money. Um, Here's an interesting question that should be relevant for all of us. Adjusted for inflation, is college more expensive now, say in 2013, or is it more expensive back in 1990, adjusted for inflation? I think we all know what the answer to that is, but the CPI will allow us to answer this very precisely. How do we do it? Well, what we need to do is we need to convert the $1,908 price, the 1990 price, into 2013 dollars. And so what we'll do is we'll take the 1990 tuition and then we're going to multiply it by a ratio of CPIs. What ratio of CPI we're going to do? We're going to do CPI 2013 divided by CPI 1990, multiply that by 1990 tuition. And so if you look at it, its 1990 tuition is, of course, in 1990 dollars. You're going to be dividing it by CPI in 1990, so essentially be canceling out the 1990 dollars. And then what you'll be left over is the 1990 tuition, but written in terms of 2013 dollars. So this will be 1990 tuition in 2013 dollars. So what would that be? It would be 1,908 multiplied by CPI 2013, so 232.6, divided by 130.7. We type that into our calculator, and we get 1908 times 232.6 divided by 130.7. And we get that college, adjusted for college in 1990, brought into today's dollars, would have cost $3,239. So in other words, since it costs $8,893, college is much more expensive adjusted for inflation than it was in 1990. Because if college had just risen with the normal increases of inflation, college would, instead of costing 1908, it should have cost 3,239, but instead it costs 8,893, so it's more than twice, maybe like 2.5 times more expensive now than it was back in 1990. And so obviously college is more expensive now, adjusted for inflation. Another way we could answer this is take the 2013 tuition and bring it back to past dollars. So we take 2013, and then what we're going to do is we want to remove the 2013 dollars. So we divide by CPI in 2013, And then the numerator is going to be CPI in 1990. And so the $2013 will be removed, and what will be left then is the $1990. So in other words, we take 8,893 multiplied by 130.7 divided by 232.6, and then we get that college in 2013 in terms of $1999 would have cost $4,997. So we compare that $4,997 to the actual cost of 1908, and we can see that college is like 2.5 times more expensive in 2013 than it was back in 1990. So that's how we do these calculations. The same calculation we use to show that J.D. Rockefeller has more wealth than Bill Gates. You can use the calculation to find out, does the minimum wage have more purchasing power now than it did in the past? You can even use these CPIs not just to compare things over time, but to compare cost of living in different states. So instead of this being 1990 and 2013, it could be something like California, like living in San Francisco or San Jose, and its CPI versus, say, living in Oregon, someplace much cheaper than California, which has its own CPI. And so you can compare what's the cost of college, or even better, change this to like your weekly earnings. Sorry, I'm not writing very well here. I'm supposed to say earnings. You can compare, do you have more purchasing power in California versus Oregon, or do you have more purchasing power in Oregon versus California, just by using the same ratios of CPIs, okay?